mean something in society. That's what the defendant told us yesterday from the stand. That is Dan Dolan's cynical, distrustful, contemptuous, resentful take on society. And we saw it on full display throughout this case. From the actions that night to his testimony here today, or here yesterday. He's wrong about the badge. It's a symbol of authority. When held or worn by a person who's also taken an oath, but in the proper context, in your jurisdiction, when you're on duty, when you have available the entire resource base of your department to support what you're doing. Supervisors, instantaneous communication, assistance at the ready, policing is a pillar of our society. It's crucial. Unfortunately, when it comes to Dan Dolan, this badge of authority became an emblem of disgrace and betrayal. You've heard Mr. Colucci during the course of this trial constantly refer to the defendant as Officer Dolan. That title has no relevance here. So what happened? What went wrong? I'll tell you what went wrong. On June 23rd, 2021, Dan Dolan blew a gasket. He saw something on the highway. He was not going to let it go. He uses the word concern. Concern. What you've seen over the past several days, do they amount to concern? They amount to someone taking matters to his own hands, someone who could not control his actions, someone who was not in the position to be of use then. So what was June 23rd, 2021? It was a Wednesday. Dominic Vincent and the Greco brothers were getting together, going over to Dominic's house to watch the NBA playoffs, enjoy a pizza, maybe sleep over, groceries for the morning. Totally innocuous conduct. It is true, after leaving the Walmart, getting on Route 95, Dominic's getting up to 126 miles an hour and traveling for a distance at about 108 miles an hour. Wrong, very wrong. Shouldn't have been happening. But he gets off the highway at exit 6, reduces the speed, is now traveling in the range of speed with the cars, 46 miles an hour in a 45 zone. The defendant couldn't keep up, lost sight, but then taking the exit, there's Dominic's car again. He speeds up. He speeds up to 70 miles an hour in a 45 zone. He's going to try to catch this vehicle. He's going to try to get the plate. And then the opportunity knocks. The Audi turns right. It turns right into the Wicked Good Pizza lot. And you've seen this by now, 100 times? The car turns at a very appropriate and normal speed in an appropriate way with a directional signal. Whatever issue or problem was perceived on the highway, it is over. No longer exists. There's no danger. Perhaps the danger exists only in the imagination of Dan Dolan. Nevertheless, he whips into that parking lot behind Dominic, comes to an abrupt stop, a hard stop. You see the mud flaps in the back waving as the stop is effectuated. A determined stop. And by the way, we saw video from slightly earlier that showed a more busy Wicked Good Pizza. That area is where pedestrians stand waiting for their pizza. Now, Officer Dolan says he's driven by. He's never a patron of that establishment. Maybe he doesn't know the lot as well as he should, right? Though he's driven by. It's a small lot, see it from the road. It's in a truck, he's high up. But at that point, he's the danger. Mr. Colucci makes something of the fact that Dominic didn't or did see the truck pull in. Well, as Dominic explained, peripheral vision. You could see the truck appear. With that force, of course, he can draw the inference. It sped in. It's not inconsistent. The door swings wide open. Dolan exits. As the door is swinging open, Dominic is leaving. The car is in reverse. Of course he put the car in reverse. Who is this lunatic that just pulled up next to me? What am I going to stay around here for? Dolan makes his way around the truck, to the car. Got the badge up, palm for stop. Mr. Colucci would want you to believe that Dominic is supposed to freeze right then and there. Should recognize that he's a police officer. In fact, he goes so far as to say he did recognize him as a police officer, that's why he left. Well, what points of reference did Dominic have to rely on to confirm that was a police officer? Was it the landscaping truck? Was it the man dressed as a landscaper in the pizza cook's estimation? Was it the way he was driving? Was it the way he was attired? What was supposed to confirm for Dominic who this was? Nothing. He has no idea anyone is really behind him or trying to catch up with him. This arrival out of nowhere, who, by the way, tells us he does things for tactical advantage. Very measured, very sure of himself. He's the one supposedly in control. Shouldn't he know how his arrival will be perceived and reacted to? We'll get to that later. So, of course Dominic is reversing. There's no other choice, no other reasonable choice. And of course, at that moment, we all know Dominic is no threat to Dolan. He's backing up. Backing up in a reasonable way, turning the car so that he can face north again on Route 3 and get out of there. A totally reasonable response to an unreasonable situation. Dolan, walking, let's use Mr. Colucci's term, walking with purpose, stride, certainly faster than usual walking nonetheless. If we rely on Mr. Colucci's term of walking, well, apparently that means Dominic isn't going that fast to begin with because he only needs to walk, not run. But he was walking with a determination. You saw the camera view, but you also heard from the witnesses who were there, could see the emotion on Dolan, the anger. something to suggest bad intentions. You need the whole context, the context from the video, the context from the people who were there. Put it all together. Get the full picture to consider its worth. So Dominic makes it to the street, the roadway, parallel to the roadway in that area around the shoulder and the edge of the lot. We don't have the camera view now. But what do we have? We have Dominic reporting firsthand experience. We have Joseph Greco reporting what happened. We have Vincent Greco reporting what happened. And we have the people in the Linden vehicle. And what do we get? We get a car parallel to the road and a Daniel Dolan standing next to the driver's window at the time the shot goes off. That's what we have. When Detective Sibowitz analyzed the car, the window, he termed this area the area of convergence. I also want to use area of convergence in another sense, in the sense that the witnesses do converge. We have 3 witnesses on one side of the gun and 3 witnesses on the other side of the gun, and in the main, their testimony converges. Is there any reason not to credit James Linden? The man works for the Department of Defense, logistics, Groton Subbase, a responsible position. What stake does he have in the outcome of this case? None. He just happened to be passing by. He had Sierra and Katie. They also testified. Responsible people as well. They came here and told you what they saw. What reason, what earthly reason do they have to not tell the truth? None. And then you're in the vehicle. Dominic, Vincent, Joey. Their testimony coheres. They put Dolan on the side of the car when he fires. Just as there was no danger to Mr. Dolan as that car was backing up. And again, when we're talking danger, we're talking about danger justifying the use of lethal level force in self-defense. No danger when the car is backing up. It is Dolan who purposefully walks the length of that lot over to that vehicle. It's his decision. Seems like a very considered, deliberate decision. He starts out, again, talking about the tactically advantageous posture he wants to be in. So he purposefully, on his own power, walks towards that car. And as he does, he purposefully puts himself in front of it. He keeps upping the ante. You can imagine Dolan, badge, palm, stop. And the car's not stopping. That's got to tick him off. That's got to tick him off. Remember, the badge used to mean something in society, he says, he tells us. The resentment. In front of that vehicle, we hear from a number of the witnesses, Dolan vaulting over or making some maneuver, pushing himself off the car to jump, land on his feet on the driver's side. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's analyze that in the context of what Dolan himself says. Now, let me be very clear. The defendant is under no obligation to testify, but he elected to testify in this case. He is subject to the same credibility assessment as any other witness. He wants to say to you, as he did yesterday, that he just kind of wound up in front of the car because the car's maneuvering. Really? Remember his testimony. I'm putting myself in harm's way. So he sees me and doesn't hit me. I'm putting myself in harm's way so he sees me. Using the word so, there's reason behind it. There's a rationale. There's purpose to what he's doing. And he tells us, you're accountable for every round that leaves that barrel. I believe that. I believe he believes that. The training, the experience that had to be drilled into him the last 16 years. He told you about his simulator training with the police, the discussion sessions about shoot and don't shoot scenarios. And he told you of the primary importance of the decision not to shoot. The decision not to shoot. What does that have to take into account? It has to take into account whether you can decide in that tense, uncertain moment whether to shoot and if it's justified. That's in the police world. In the civilian world, different. The judge gave you the law. The judge gave you the law of self-defense and all the points that you'll have to consider. But there Dolan was, accountable for every round that leaves the barrel. So you know he knows what he's doing. These are not random actions. These are not mistaken actions. These are purposeful, calculated actions of someone very familiar with firearms, very practiced with firearms. Remember, he takes him down every last screw. Intimately familiar with firearms. Although there's nothing he doesn't know about them. So when he tells you that he's had this extensive training on when to shoot and when not to shoot, perhaps he just did not assimilate the essential lessons very well. Maybe one of those lessons is, don't fire in anger. Don't fire when you don't need to. Don't create the danger. Remember, Dolan is upping the ante at each and every step. Why is he putting himself in front of that car? Why is he putting himself in a position where he needs, in his mind, to shoot? And what good will shooting do? We heard his explanation. His explanation is, well, if he's going to run into me and either take me down the road or run over me, injuries will be less because he'll be incapacitated in some way. Really? You incapacitate a driver of a moving vehicle? All you've done is create an unguided missile. It's futile. And you could do all this and make this calculus in a situation he created and set up with a tactical advantage, but what he couldn't do was step out of the way. That's one thing he apparently could not do, because he was not going to let that vehicle go. That vehicle was going to be in his control, whether he had to do it with his own hands, force of will. And when he was not obeyed, He made it to the driver's door, drew, and fired. And caused that perforation in the glass at the area of convergence. And you see, this is an image with the measure, the ruler. This is, of course, a close-up. But ladies and gentlemen, look at all the pictures during the deliberation. Get a full sense of just how close to the B-pillar and to the sill this is. The very bottom right-hand corner when you're facing that window from the outside. We all saw Dolan's demonstration yesterday up here by the witness box, we've been using as a mock-up vehicle, if you will. You remember when Dolan was asked, how were you positioned when you shot? And he stretched his arm out to his right side like this. And said, I made the shot this way. Really? That's what they taught him how to shoot? That's how they taught him to shoot? Where's the aim? Where's the control? The most unnatural shooting position you can imagine is the one he employed. And by the way, where would it go? He said he was standing in front of the car. He's doing this, and that's how he got into the window. With, by the way, 3 inches to spare to the B-pillar. 3 inches to spare. And then we're to believe that that bullet made it in that direction through that perforation and into Dominic's arm back here so that it could travel forward and cause all the damage. Consider that configuration, ladies and gentlemen. Consider if that is even physically possible. It's not. It's not. Does it sound preposterous to you? I'll tell you why it should sound preposterous to you. Because Dolan is lying through his teeth. He's trying to save his skin. He still can't admit to you, or maybe even to himself, that something went wrong. He didn't get up there and say, honest mistake. No. He said, I had an obligation. He talked about Dominic as the target. He says he's doing this because of his heart. He wanted to have a fatherly talk with Dominic. Yet, after the shooting, and Dolan catches up to Dominic and the boys, some first aid is offered in the form of a tourniquet that is makeshift in nature at this point. Doesn't have his first aid kit. Now might be a time for a fatherly talk, one of consolation, a little bit of support. Mr. Colucci offers the fact that Dolan said, give him space. That was an extra added first aid benefit that Dominic received that night. No. Dolan had plenty of time on the side of that road after the shooting to smoke a cigarette. But where's the fatherly talk? Where's the supportive nature that he wants to portray as a school resource officer, helping kids near and dear? It completely evaporated in the face of a shooting that he himself committed. And he says, I'm responsible for that round. And he followed the recipient of the round. And that was his behavior. It allows you to glimpse his nature and estimate its worth. He was asked, would you give the same advice to your wife to stop for that badge under those circumstances? Not only did he say, yes, stop for the badge. When asked, how is anyone supposed to know? What's his answer? There's only one way to find out. No. Who's going to take that chance? Who's going to take the chance that the landscaper or the pizza shop owner who's dressed nothing like a police officer has a vehicle that doesn't even come close to looking like a police vehicle and comes charging in at you in a pizza shop lot? Oh, no questions asked, yes, officer. That's nutty. That's just nutty. No. There are alternatives. If you have reason to believe that that's a police officer, maybe you can get on your phone to 911 and report what's going on. Say, I think this could be a police officer, but I'm not sure, and I want to do the right thing. So I don't want to run, but I want to let people know what's going on. That's one response he could give his wife. Be perfectly acceptable. No. Maybe he cares more about the badge and what it used to mean to society than to anything else. And then we have Dolan's explanations for each of the actions that he took. Each of the actions that he took, and the assessments that he made. First, he says he believed that the black Audi that sped past him was fleeing the scene of a crime. Why would you think that? The speed was horrendous, of course. No argument there. What additional fact do you need to complete the inference to that? You need something more. He rash judged the situation. There are many reasons people speed, unfortunately. He was wrong about that. He's on Nooseneck Hill Road. He sees the vehicle. He thinks it's going to wait for a break in the traffic so it can now maneuver quickly and recklessly. It never does, of course, but he's of that mindset. What was the inference that allowed him to come to that conclusion? Nothing. Again, he's rash judging, or he's justifying, But he had to close the distance to increase speed. Now he's the one speeding. Now he's the one endangering the public. For what? To give these kids a talking to? He could perfectly well call 911 after the shooting. But he knows that he could certainly call 911 to report what's going on. And it's not his responsibility. No one wants a Ford F-350 trying to track down a speeder. Hand it off. The state police are all over the place. Coventry, West Greenwich. They'll come, they'll try to find the car. Hey, maybe the West Greenwich police might know the car. Small town. Maybe West Greenwich could give Dominic the fatherly talking to. Now, Dolan makes another unwarranted conclusion once he gets into the lot. He thinks or perceives that the black Audi is turning into his path in an aggressive way, not as if he's just trying to park, backing in, like the vehicle on the other side of the parking lot that you see is backed in. Seems to be a common occurrence at Wicked Good Pizza that people back into parking spaces. Some people like to back in, some people like to pull forward, just like in the parking garage here. Dominic had an empty parking lot essentially, except for that one other vehicle, to himself. He had all the space in the world to expect to be able to make that maneuver and back into that space. But in comes Dolan at the speed that you could see on that video. Who blocked whom? Then, when he gets out of his vehicle and makes his way towards the Audi, he makes another unwarranted assumption, that he will be recognized as a police officer. I mean, already, his batting average is dismal here. He makes an unwarranted assumption. It is not reasonable for the reasons I stated earlier. What points of reference does anyone have to confirm that that's a police officer? And by the way, under the law as the judge has given it to you, he's not a police officer in West Greenwich. He has no authority to seize or stop. He can't stop the vehicle. He can't seize the passengers. It simply does not apply. Dominic and his buddies had every reason to believe that the scene that was unfolding there was the makings of a carjacking. That's a reasonable possibility. If Dolan can think what he thought, why isn't it reasonable for Dominic to think, this is bad, I've got to get out of here? Carjacking, whatever. But it's a reasonable assumption when you see that unfold. Not that we want a rash judge. But Dominic was defenseless. He didn't have the gun. He's being approached by someone who does, and a badge, under conditions that are totally unexplainable to Dominic at the time. He doesn't have the additional information to make the response that Dolan wants him to make. Well, as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, Dolan is the one here creating the risk. Dolan is the one here creating the danger. Dolan is the one who's finding a way to use the force that he did. You can't just step in front of a car that's either moving or about to move and then claim you're the one put in peril by the situation by the driver. You just can't claim that. Otherwise, we can all go walking in front of cars that are about to take off and start shooting. That doesn't make any sense, does it? No, but that's essentially what he did. Oh yes, one other thing. He moved to the side. And remember what James Linden said. Linden added, yeah, he looked in the window before he shot. Again, the cognitive process, the intent, he knows what he's doing. He knows exactly what he's doing. He's intending what he's doing. And then he fires. He fires, again, into that area of convergence. Into the back of the arm it goes. Bullet comes near the front, little defect in the skin, and is removed. How, ladies and gentlemen, is that possible any other way than as Dominic said it? He moved to his side, away from the barrel of the gun. And that's how this area of skin was exposed. This area of his arm was exposed. It wasn't, by the way, up like this. What's he protecting himself when Mr. Colucci gestures like this? What's he protecting here? Is he protecting his head? And if so, from where? From the side. Not from the front. The front, Colucci would have done this. He didn't. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I say to you, the story as told by the defendant is preposterous. And Mr. Colucci makes a big deal about small variations in statements made by the witnesses at the time. Little variations. They were here to explain themselves. They were here to undergo cross-examination. You're the one who decides the credibility of James Linden, of Sierra Linden, of Katie Reedy, of Dominic Vincent, of Joseph Greco, of Vincent Greco. You decide their credibility. Did they hold up well? Were they consistent, internally consistent? on direct and cross? Did they shrink in the face of cross-examination? Did they maintain their position? Katie Reedy, the vehicle wasn't moving. She has no stake in this whatsoever. James Linden, the same thing. Vehicle wasn't moving at the time the shot was fired. They have no stake in this whatsoever. They have no reason to even know the name Dan Dolan. Are the witnesses that the state presented witnesses worthy of you placing your trust in? That's your decision, but I submit they cohere, they converge, and they have no reason to make anything up. Right? Dominic's making a statement in the hospital, in his hospital bed. He doesn't see a video. He's left his phone in his car, as you can see. No one can reach him. The state police are talking to him before his parents are talking to him, as he said. He's got a bullet in his arm. He's making a statement. He's not coordinating with anyone. And as the Linden said, well, we weren't coordinating our statements. We weren't even talking about this case. Those, ladies and gentlemen, are people I submit you put your faith and trust in as witnesses, compared to the self-serving stories told by the defendant. Do you put your faith and trust in the work of Adam Kennett? 126 miles an hour, 108 miles an hour for the Audi. Did he present well, like an officer should? Did he seem credible? Did Detective Seibowitz seem credible to you? Did he seem like he treats his job with care, wants to get things right, and report them accurately here in court? Does he seem like the person who would commit to a theory if he couldn't back it up? State 78 on screen. Ladies and gentlemen, when you ponder the theory that Detective Seibowitz explained to you, when he said, I took a procedure for finding trajectories and I adapted it. I wanted to see if I could come up with a solution that would shed additional light on this case. And he did. He examines the car, and he notices, yes, the B pillar has no projectile defect to it. He's working with glass. He can't do trajectory rods. He doesn't have a second point in the vehicle where the bullet ended. What he has is a B pillar. And he has geometry. Simple, plain geometry. The kind of measurements you can come up with by using a protractor. And he states very plainly and very simply, if someone's in this zone, forward of that 110-degree arc, and fires a gun towards that vehicle into the window at that 3.5-inch distance where the perforation is, it will always hit the B pillar. And he's giving you a zone. He's not saying, I know exactly where the shooter was standing. He's giving you a zone. This is evidence to help you evaluate the testimony of the eyewitnesses. A zone of possibility, but also the zone of impossibility. And that, I submit, ladies and gentlemen, is why Dan Dolan had to offer you what he did yesterday on the stand. Remember, again, using this stand as the car. He needed to keep himself in front of the car and firing. Because once he's to the side of the car, self-defense is out the window. Can't use it. There's no threat. The car just drives forward. He doesn't even need an avenue of escape. He just stands there. The car goes forward. No deadly threat. So he absolutely, positively has to keep himself in front of the car when that shot is fired. Or, I think as Mr. Colucci tried to explain, when the thought process started, the reasoning process. Nevertheless, he extends his arm out this way, like I showed you before, and somehow moving and manages within whatever, he didn't tell you how far away he was from the fender when the gun discharged. He goes through that hole. Again, not to be believed if we have an injury to the back of Dominic's arm. Unless we all want to believe that Dominic somehow pressed his arm in a way that would receive that bullet coming in at an angle from the front of the car, and maybe in the process of flight of the bullet, it made a right-hand turn. It doesn't do that. It simply does not hold water, ladies and gentlemen. You know, Mr. Colucci made a big deal about little details with respect to someone like Dominic. Listen to the 911 call. Dominic said the guy gave his badge number. You won't hear the badge number on the recording. Well, what will you hear? Remember, Dominic didn't hear the other side of the call. He could only hear what the speaker in his presence was saying. And remember what you hear near the end of the call. He's asked for his phone number, and he hurriedly starts to give it out. 910-581. 910-581. He stops. He doesn't give the full phone. Who's supposed to know that's a phone number? And then the 911 operator kicks in and gives the entire phone number. Dominic can't hear that. He doesn't know what's going on the other side of that conversation. So Mr. Colucci's using examples like that to say, well, you know, you can't trust this Dominic fellow. Well, but again, ladies and gentlemen, this is not a case between a police officer and a civilian. This is a case with a civilian defendant who has to play by the rules set by this court under the law as the judge has given it to you, and that you have sworn to follow in your deliberations. He claims self-defense. Under the law as the judge has given it to you, he needs to be the one to not have started the combative confrontation. He also needs to be the one who takes advantage of an avenue of escape before resorting to deadly force. What did he testify to yesterday on cross-examination? Mr. Guglielmo posed this question. You had the avenue of escape. Answer, yes, sir. You had the avenue of escape. And that's easily seen and easily demonstrated. No one else in that lot. No one else in that lot, just the Dolan vehicle and that other vehicle up by the door, but that's inconsequential for this purpose. Roadway here, pizza lot here, car here. All you have to do is do this. If he thought a car was coming in front of him, or better still, don't put yourself there in the first place. You have no business doing that. But then certainly, if he's vaulted over the roof, or jumped, or skipped, and he's at the window, again, he doesn't need to do anything. This car is not a threat of that kind to him, where he gets to use deadly force. If he's on the side of it, it's just going forward. That's it. You can't shoot that. Ladies and gentlemen, the state is asking you to find Daniel Dolan guilty under the law as the judge has given it to you, to find him guilty of count 1, which is assault with a dangerous weapon on Dominic Greco. And under the law as the defendant, under the law, as the judge has given it to you, you consider whether the defendant did this act and intended an offensive or harmful contact by virtue of shooting his gun. Did he intend to do what he did? Where's the intent? It's all over the place, even up until the last moment. Knowingly drawing his gun. I'm doing this, I'm intentionally taking this gun out of my holster. I am putting it in a position where it can be fired. I'm making assessments as I'm doing it. That's intent. It's not an accident. It's not mistake. It's just like I raised my hand. Why? Because I wanted to raise my hand. I did it voluntarily and intentionally. Same thing with Officer Dolan. Officer Dolan's actions come with an explanation, right? It's a self-defense. It's intentional. He intended to use that weapon, and he did use that weapon, and he caused serious bodily injury to Dominic Vincent. How did he do it? The judge has given you the law on that. 3 options. Creating a substantial risk of death, 1. Causing protracted loss or the impairment of the function of any bodily member or organ, it's 2. Or causes serious permanent disfigurement, 3. Your choice. I suggest that the serious bodily injury in this case fits best under the protracted loss of any bodily member or organ. The arm immobilized for months, followed by PT, followed by loss of use, pain, what he had to go through, the protracted loss of the use of this arm. Then, with respect to counts 2 and 3, Joseph Greco, Vincent Greco, it's an assault with a dangerous weapon, but not in the same manner as with Dominic. We don't have the serious bodily injury. What we have is truly an assault, an attempt or offer to do a corporal hurt to another. This time he happens to be using the firearm because the 2 of them are in the zone of danger. You heard them testify. They were both put in fear of the harmful or offensive contact, and they were in that zone of danger. It's the putting in fear that is key, and the laws the judge has given it to you controls. And then finally, with respect to count 4, using a firearm while committing a crime of violence. Seems obvious. Maybe I don't even need to explain. But discharging the firearm is something this defendant did. And if you find that he did so while committing formally the crime of assault with a dangerous weapon, that's it. Find him guilty on that as well. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we heard Dan Dolan say yesterday, I didn't think I did anything criminal. You have the power to tell him he's wrong. Do it.